Ever been treated like you didn't belong when you were exactly where you were supposed to be? Watch what happens when the wrong person gets second-guessed. Dr. Monica Bradshaw had done this 100 times before. Walk into a bank, sign a few papers, withdraw money, walk out. Simple. But today, something felt different. She stepped out of her black Tesla, adjusting the sleeve of her tailored navy blue suit. The California sun bounced off the tinted windows of Brentwood Pacific Bank in Los Angeles. This wasn't just any bank. It was one of the institutions that held millions of dollars in corporate assets for Bradshaw Financial Group, the investment firm she built from the ground up. She had arrived to make a personal withdrawal, nothing unusual, just enough to cover an upcoming real estate investment. As she walked through the glass doors, she glanced around. The place was sleek, modern, filled with the quiet hum of banking business. Tellers working efficiently, customers signing forms, security guards standing at their usual posts. Her heels clicked against the polished floor as she approached the counter, sliding her ID and withdrawal slip to the young teller behind the glass. The woman glanced at the name, then at Monica, then back at the name. A pause. Monica's eyes flickered with curiosity. A pause that long usually meant something, but she waited, keeping her expression neutral. The teller glanced over her shoulder, hesitating before whispering something to a man behind her. A man who, in less than a minute, would turn a routine transaction into an insult. That's when he stepped forward. Greg Thornton, bank manager, mid-50s, graying hair, a look that suggested he'd seen everything. Yet, somehow, he looked at Monica like she was a question he didn't have an answer for. "Miss Bradshaw, is it?" he asked, eyeing the documents. "Dr. Bradshaw," she corrected, keeping her tone polite. "I'm here to make a withdrawal." Greg forced a smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "I see. And, this account, it's yours?" She let the question sit there for a second. "Yes," she said evenly. Another pause. Another glance at the paperwork. "You understand that for transactions of this size, we need to verify certain details," he continued. Monica raised an eyebrow. "Of course. I've made similar withdrawals before. Is there an issue?" Greg didn't answer immediately. Instead, he flipped through the papers again, as if waiting for something. Something that would confirm whatever doubt had just crept into his mind. But nothing was there, because there was no issue. And yet, the moment stretched. Monica could feel it now. That shift, that hesitation, that invisible line she'd just crossed in his mind. It was the same look she'd seen before, the one that said, "Something about this doesn't add up." The only problem? She knew exactly what didn't add up for him. She was a black woman withdrawing a significant amount of money, and that apparently was enough to make people uncomfortable. But she wasn't going to let that slide. She leaned forward slightly, her voice steady. "Mr. Thornton, if there's an actual issue with my request, I'd appreciate it if you let me know now. Otherwise, I'd like to proceed." Greg hesitated, and that's when Monica knew. This was about to turn into something much bigger. But she had no idea just how far it would go. Greg Thornton's fingers drummed lightly on the counter. He was stalling. Monica could see it plain as day. "Dr. Bradshaw," he finally said, his voice laced with what he probably thought was politeness. "This is quite a large amount. Bank policy requires us to conduct additional verification before releasing funds of this size." Monica tilted her head slightly. "That's interesting, because I withdrew a similar amount last month from this very branch without an issue." Greg's lips pressed together. The room around them carried on as usual. Tellers assisting customers, security guards chatting near the entrance, a woman in a business suit juggling her purse and phone while signing a form. Everything was normal, except for this one conversation. "Policies can change," Greg replied smoothly. "Right. So let's verify whatever you need to verify," Monica said, keeping her tone controlled. Greg nodded at the teller, who turned and walked off toward a side office. Monica folded her arms. "How long is this going to take?" "It shouldn't be too long," Greg said, flashing that same empty smile. Monica exhaled slowly, glancing at her watch. 5 minutes had passed, then 6, then 7. She noticed a pattern. Every single customer who had come in after her had been helped and sent on their way. People walked in, did their business, and walked out, while she stood in the same spot, waiting. She shifted her stance, scanning the room. A young man in a hoodie had just deposited cash and walked off without any extra scrutiny. An elderly woman had withdrawn a substantial amount and wasn't asked a single question. So why was she still standing here? Greg cleared his throat, drawing her attention back. We're just waiting for an additional authorization from our internal department. Monica's patience was running thin. Mr. Thornton, let's not waste each other's time. If there's something you're questioning, be upfront about it. Otherwise, process my request and let me be on my way. Greg's fake smile didn't budge. It's just standard protocol, Dr. Bradshaw. Standard protocol? Monica almost laughed. But before she could say another word, something caught her eye, one of the security guards speaking quietly to the teller who had left earlier, the same teller who had been holding her paperwork. The guard's eyes flicked toward Monica, then quickly away. Something was off, and Monica knew exactly where this was heading, but she wasn't about to let it play out the way they expected. Monica kept her posture relaxed, but her mind was already moving 10 steps ahead. She wasn't just dealing with an inconvenience, she was being tested. Greg Thornton wasn't just verifying her identity, he was searching for a reason to justify his suspicion, a reason to explain why a woman like her, standing in a power suit and asking for her own money, didn't quite sit right with him. And now, security had entered the equation. The guard, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a stiff posture, had repositioned himself near the counter. He wasn't looking directly at her, but he didn't need to. Monica glanced back at Greg. How much longer? Greg pretended to check something on his computer. It shouldn't be much longer. She glanced at her watch. 12 minutes. That was long enough. She let out a slow breath. Let's cut the act, Mr. Thornton. If there's an actual issue with my account, say so. If not, process my request. Now. Greg didn't flinch, but something in his expression shifted, like he wasn't expecting her to press so directly. Then he leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. Dr. Bradshaw, I need you to understand that banks have an obligation to prevent fraudulent activity. There it was, fraudulent activity. He didn't say it outright, but Monica heard exactly what he meant. You're suggesting I'm committing fraud? She asked, her voice sharp but steady. Greg raised his hands as if to backpedal. Not at all, but we have policies in place to protect our clients and our institution. Large withdrawals require extra precautions. I'm sure you understand. Monica's patience snapped. Funny, she said, her voice cool. You didn't ask the elderly woman who withdrew her cash a few minutes ago for extra precautions, or the young man in the hoodie, or the businessman who just walked out with a briefcase. So I'll ask again, what exactly are you implying? Greg's face tightened. The security guard took a step closer. Monica felt the tension in the air. A subtle shift, the kind most people wouldn't notice, but she'd seen it before. She'd been in rooms where people like Greg Thornton spoke in coded language, where policies were used as a smokescreen for something else. She had spent years proving people like him wrong, and she wasn't about to start entertaining this nonsense today. She reached for her phone. Greg's eyes flicked to it. There's no need to... Monica held up a finger, silencing him, and pressed a contact. A deep voice answered almost immediately. Paul, it's Monica. The room got quiet. Greg's expression shifted. Not nervous, not yet, but suddenly more attentive. Yes, I'm at Brentwood Pacific Bank, Monica continued, having an issue with a routine withdrawal. The manager here is insisting on extra verification, even though I've done this plenty of times before. Greg's mouth pressed into a thin line. Monica smiled. Oh, you're familiar with this branch? That's great. Hold on. She lowered the phone and gave Greg a polite but piercing look. The regional director would like to have a word with you. For the first time, Greg looked uncertain. The security guard shifted uncomfortably. The teller glanced toward the office, realizing the situation had completely changed. And Monica, she was just getting started. Greg Thornton hesitated, just a split second. But Monica caught it. He looked at the phone in her hand like it was a live grenade. Dr. Bradshaw, She extended the phone toward him. Paul's waiting. Greg took a breath, squared his shoulders, and reached for the phone with forced composure. But Monica could see it, the slight tremor in his fingers, the tightening of his jaw. Hello, Paul, Greg said, keeping his voice even. Yes, I understand, but we were simply following protocol. A transaction of this size requires additional... A pause. Monica watched his expression shift, the forced confidence draining from his face. Yes, I see. Greg muttered, his voice quieter now. Of course. No, that was never my intent. Another pause, then his eyes flicked up to Monica, and she saw it. The moment he realized he had completely miscalculated. Absolutely. I'll take care of it right away, Greg said, swallowing hard. I appreciate the call. He handed the phone back to Monica with stiff fingers. Paul would like to speak with you. Monica took the phone, bringing it to her ear. Yes? Paul's voice was clear, firm. I'm so sorry about this, Monica. That should never have happened. I'll handle it immediately. Monica glanced at Greg, watching as he struggled to maintain his composure. I trust you will, she replied. Thanks, Paul. She ended the call and slipped the phone into her blazer pocket. Greg cleared his throat. Dr. Bradshaw, She held up a hand. No need. Just process my request. Greg turned sharply toward the teller. Release the funds. The teller, who had been pretending not to watch, practically scrambled to complete the transaction. The security guard who had inched closer earlier suddenly found a reason to step back. As the bills were counted out, Monica stood perfectly still, watching Greg. The man who had held all the power 15 minutes ago now stood stiff, his confidence shattered. The room wasn't watching her anymore. They were watching him, and the silence said everything. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Monica collected the money, sliding the crisp bills into her leather folio with deliberate precision. She wasn't rushed. She wasn't flustered. If anything, she wanted Greg Thornton to feel every second of what was coming next. She secured the folio under her arm, then finally turned back to him. Mr. Thornton, she said, her voice controlled but cutting. Before I leave, let's clarify a few things. Greg stiffened. You weren't following protocol. You were following a bias. His lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to deny it, but no words came. Monica took a step closer, not lowering her voice, not sparing him from the attention of every single person in that room. I own multiple accounts with this bank. My firm has brought in millions in business. My identity has never been in question. And yet today, for no reason other than your own assumption, you decided I was a suspicious customer. Greg's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. You weren't protecting the bank. You weren't protecting my assets. You were protecting your own small-minded view of who should and shouldn't have access to this kind of wealth. The weight of her words settled over the room. The teller, now suddenly fascinated with her keyboard, avoided eye contact. The security guard, who had positioned himself so boldly earlier, stood frozen, probably realizing that he had backed the wrong side of this interaction. Greg inhaled sharply. Dr. Bradshaw, She held up a hand. Don't. He shut his mouth. Monica reached for her phone again. This time she wasn't calling Paul. She was calling corporate. Greg blinked. The color in his face drained just slightly. Who are you calling? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Monica met his gaze. Your boss's boss. The silence was deafening, and for the first time since she stepped into that bank, Greg Thornton knew exactly where he stood. But this wasn't just about him anymore. The phone rang twice before a confident voice answered. Dr. Bradshaw, how can I help you? It was Robert Ellis, Senior Vice President of Operations. Greg Thornton visibly swallowed. Robert, I just had a rather eye-opening experience at one of your branches. Monica's voice was calm, deliberate. I was profiled, humiliated, and nearly denied access to my own money by a manager who had no legitimate reason to question me. A pause. Then, which branch? She let the words hang in the air before answering. Brentwood Pacific. Greg closed his eyes. He already knew. Robert's tone sharpened. Who handled your transaction? Monica turned slightly, making sure everyone, especially Greg, heard her response loud and clear. Greg Thornton. The weight of his own name landed like a hammer in the room. The air shifted. The tellers, the security guards, even the customers, they were all listening now. Robert didn't hesitate. That's unacceptable. I'll handle it personally. Monica exhaled slowly. Good. Then she added, but I don't want a private conversation about this. I want accountability. Another pause. Then Robert spoke. I understand. Greg's hands were at his sides, clenched into tight fists. He looked utterly powerless. Monica ended the call and slipped her phone back into her pocket. She didn't need to say anything else. The damage was already done. Greg was finished. The whisper started before she even turned toward the door. Did she just call corporate? Oh, he's gone. He knows it too. I mean, it was obvious what he was doing. Monica glanced back one last time. Greg was staring at the floor, the weight of his choices finally catching up to him. She had fought battles like this before, but this time, she wasn't the one leaving in shame. She stepped outside, the warmth of the Los Angeles sun on her face. She had walked in as just another customer. She walked out as the woman who reminded everyone exactly who she was. This isn't just about money. It's about who gets second-guessed, who gets treated as a threat, who has to prove, over and over again, that they belong. But here's the truth. Power isn't always about a title. It's about knowing when to stand your ground. Because when you do, the world has no choice but to take notice. Have you ever been in a situation where someone questioned you, not because of what you did, but because of who they thought you were? Drop your story in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if you've ever let someone second guess your worth, don't ever let it happen again.